Oh, my love. I just have some space and I felt guided to come on here and just open up and see whatever messages want to come through. So, whatever you see on the title will be what came through. And I just automatically grabbed my Priestess of Light deck. So, just welcoming in you and the higher power energy to support this process. And we have balance and sacred action. Okay, this is interesting because earlier I was having this contemplation as I took a walk. And one of the things that I was thinking about was actually how when you first go into the soul merge in your connection and then go into like the separation where you're processing the dark night of the soul and trying to understand everything that's been happening, you're in this phase where you're balancing and learning to balance and harmonize the connection or the mirror points that were reflected back to you. And a lot of times the masculine and feminine in the separation point go into a lot of the opposing energies. So, where it will look like the feminine is chasing in the physical and the masculine is running in the physical. But in the higher energies, it's like the masculine is chasing in the energies and the feminine is running in the higher energies or something of that nature. So, there's this working with the extremes of the connection. And one of the things that we've been speaking about recently is the financial information and how many of the masculines are embodied in the physical, very focused on money, monetary, physical world stability, and focusing on that energy. And many of the feminines tend to focus on the emotional and spiritual, intuitive side of things, and where those energies are in those opposing energies. But obviously, all together, all that information brings about the balance, right? And as you're unpacking the information that was activated within you in your soul merge initiation, when you're unpacking the gifts and the codes and the shadows that the masculine reflected back to you or the feminine reflected back to you, it's the opportunity now to take those two seemingly opposing views and work with them inside on your internal union. So there's multiple layers of balancing that is occurring. So first you're balancing the connection and then you're focusing on your internal union balance, which brings the focus back to you. But usually during this dance, you're also still learning from the connection. So you're learning from what was reflected back to you from the counterpart, the twin flame, the masculine, the feminine, all depending on your situation. Now, here we do talk a lot about being initiated through love and the mirrors that are being reflected back. And I did a video on this a couple years ago that sometimes the mirrors are the opposite, right? Sometimes it's an exact reflection, sometimes it's the opposite, sometimes it's a mirror to show you where you're not loving yourself or where you're self betraying, things of that nature. Not necessarily that you're doing the same behavior externally, but how are you treating yourself internally? And I know you guys know a lot about this. Most of you here probably already, but it wanted to be acknowledged. Like I said, I was contemplating this while I was on my walk, and it felt like it wanted to be acknowledged because there is this energy where you're focusing, you're balancing and harmonizing the connection and your internal balance. And for many feminines, this is a key piece that's exceedingly important in why your inner union is even more important than you may have thought is because as you work the connection and you harmonize what was reflected back to you, now you're holding a full stability point in the connection. So if at the beginning you were kind of both swaying and pulling on each other or pushing on each other, when you bring the focus back to you, then that side of the connection actually harmonizes and balances. And often, what you will feel if you are not already is that you feel a calming and balancing on the other side with the masculine. And even if you're not, even if you're still feeling some tumultuous energy, it's not necessarily about you doing anything but holding that counterpoint, holding the balance, even when you feel the waves, even when you feel the emotions, even when you feel that they may be going through something intense. It's not necessarily about you shutting it out or ignoring it. It's also not necessarily about you needing to do anything about it in that manner. It's really just about you coming back to your center, like, okay, I'm feeling this. Is it time for me to just hold steady and hold balance while the masculine goes through whatever process they're going through to reharmonize and rebalance their inner energies? And that can be true. And then there can be a part two. There might be a bit of a reflection that's occurring, and it is required for you to take sacred action and get focused decisively on where whatever you're feeling, you might have a thread or some residuals of that in your system, but it's not necessarily about taking on the whole process, right? Because at the beginning, there's this tendency for the feminine, many of the feminines, to want to make it better for the masculine or to feeling like responsible to take all of the weight of the emotion and the spiritual. And for a time, I that may be exactly what is required for the feminine to build her spiritual muscle and balance out her or his, apologies, emotions. But also, really, it's really the long-term goal is to be able to do it all, right? To be able to hold all of those things and to be able to hold the stability, to hold the physical world, to hold the emotions, to hold the spiritual all for yourself. And what this does is, again, it automatically tips the scales. If the masculine has not been working with all of those parts of their selves, then this is where all of a sudden that will rise up, and then they'll have to be looking at that. So when you feel that, right? This is where it's really important that you check in and become decisive and discern. Am I actually supposed to take action? Or is my sacred action stillness, stability, and being comfortable with allowing the masculine to feel uncomfortable? Okay, my loves? Because it's not it's compassion. It's compassionate action in many ways because you're allowing the masculine to go through their experience of balancing and harmonizing their physical world, emotions, and spiritual world. And that is where their next levels of growth can occur. The same way you embodying more deeply into the physical right now and is supporting your next levels of growth. And with this, I feel guided to share something that came in on my most recent member video for any of you who might want to check in on that. I just opened up and I was checking in, and it's interesting how we're diving into the money energy with the masculine and feminine, but also like where that's been a survival protective mechanism that many of the masculines, even if they're financially doing well, they use finances, money, and workaholism as a defense mechanism to avoid emotions or the spiritual side of things. And so it's protected them from having to look at or deal with those things. But this is part of what is starting to thaw out. And what came through on that video was actually this vision of the inner child awakening within the masculine. And this part felt significant when we sometimes talk about that the masculines and feminines resonate with the journey a little bit different, or the language different, or even the internal union different. And it came through that many of the masculines may awaken their intuition, their creation energy, their what is sometimes contributed to, or many times contributed to, attributed to feminine attributes. But where this is coming up for the masculine is within the inner child that was suppressed and frozen and hiding. And this makes so much sense if we really drop into it, because this is where many of the masculines in childhood were taught: don't cry, don't show your emotions, don't act like a baby, don't act like a little girl, whatever have you. And yes, this can absolutely apply to those, whether no matter what body you are in, right? And we dove a bit deeper into those messages over on Patreon. So it seems like there's another level of these energies thawing out, inner child energies thawing out for the collective. The masculine is supporting, bringing through these messages. But another cool message that came through, and especially for the feminines or any of you who have been already doing deep inner child work, reparenting, and retrieval, it went into this message connected to if you went through a lot of really hard stuff and that's what you've been reparenting, is like through your trauma. It came up to be aware that you may actually have some areas in your system that could be a subconscious limitation, where you're actually settling for things that are better than what it was, but they're still mediocre or still not as much as you deserve. And that felt really important, because that is that like key piece between moving from survival to thriving. But then, even if you're feeling in some of those thriving energies comparatively to where you were before, this can be the key piece of moving from thriving to flourishing. Okay, my loves, which makes sense. This is the next levels of our growth phase, right? Especially for many of you who have been doing the deep work. I know many of you are connecting in as divine feminines, sacred feminines, and it looks like, this is that bridge again of thriving to flourishing. So I'm really, really excited that this energy is coming in for the collective, especially coupled with rewriting and reframing our relationship to money and resources and supports, as we're opening up to letting ourselves actually receive at the levels we deserve to receive reciprocity, on many levels, not just with money, but with respect, with understanding, with care, with kindness, with appreciation, right? So many deserve so much more, and the recognition for what you have been accomplishing. And this isn't necessarily about needing the validation. You already know within you, you've been validating and affirming for yourself. But those next levels of um, thriving and flourishing are the state where you actually now start to receive that in the physical world, receiving the reciprocity, receiving the accolades and the recognition. Again, not because you're requiring that to love yourself or feel better about yourself, but because, my loves, this is what we actually deserve. It's what you always deserved. And now You're strengthening the muscle to let yourself receive that through whatever means it would like to come to you that is divinely aligned and appropriate and respectful for you and your standards. Okay. So this is just really exciting to me that I'm really seeing, feeling, and sensing and witnessing, and now bringing forth energy supports and messages and embodiment for the thriving and the flourishing. Okay, my loves. Love it. I also love that this message really wanted to come through as it was sort of rolling around as I went for my walk. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. I'll put all my information in the pinned comments. For any of you who did not see it, I did post a free resolving limitations or blocks to money on the channel here. It's free for any of you who would like to tap into that. I do see and feel and sense some more energies opening up. I also, with the energies that are opening up around this, I wanted you to know, if you didn't know, I actually do inner child retrieval sessions in my advanced sessions. If there's any of you who would like to participate in that, if you didn't know, I do have more advanced soul retrieval and spiritual sessions. So, again, that'll be on my schedule. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Let me know how you're doing. And again, again, I'll see you soon. Take care. Much love. Bye.